we're going to start working now with the asphalt law, which is the top part of our geometry. So we're going to add a ground. For the pieces to collide properly, we're going to hide it, and we keep going with the physical properties. We set up a force of 0.7 and we are going to add the rigid bodies. With this button, we can isolate the actual geometry we are working with, so we can preview it a little bit better. Okay, the idea is that all these big pieces, these big chunks, they are not going to move. They are going to be static. Also, we want to add constraints so everything doesn't go and fly around the whole scene. And of course, this is going to make our simulation look more organic. It is very important before we make the pieces passive ones that we add constraints to the whole geometry. That way, the smaller pieces are going to still be attached to the big chunks. If we don't do that, the big chunks are not going to have constraints, and the smaller ones won't behave in a realistic way. So now we can add the constraints. Here we can see them. And now I can select the big chunks and select it as passive. Now those are going to stay in place and still will affect the whole geometry. Now if we hit play, those are going to start falling, as you can see, because the pieces of the bottom don't have any rigid body collisions yet. And here in this part we can see how the mesh attaches because of the rigid bodies. So let's start working with the mesh below. Let's go to the asphalt law. We set up a friction of 0.7 and now we can add the rigid bodies. And basically here we do the same, just that in this part we're not going to use rigid bodies. The thing that I'm going to do with these pieces is that I'm going to select them, and now we're going to set them as passive. Okay, remember to save your progress, and we can keep going. Okay, here now we can see how the main part of our scene is already finished. If we hit play, we can see how this falls, but nothing happens because we still haven't animated. We're going to tell these pieces to start deactivated. Also the pieces of the bottom, we can set them. So when I hit play, they won't move until something external activates them. How are we going to do this? Well, first of all, we're going to add a sphere. I'm going to scale it. Maybe make it a little bit flat and move it right here. I apply the scale and now we're going to animate this. So we're going to move this to there, so we will move all the pieces in between. We're going to start here in frame 20. I'm going to add a keyframe. And now we're going to move to the frame 100. Move it and add another keyframe. With the T key we can set up the splines to linear. Okay, now we're going to save, select this, and now convert it to a rigid body object and set it as animated. And here in the collections we are going to use the mesh. Now let's see what happens. Now here we can see the object is interacting properly. So at this point we're going to add some modifications. For example, we're going to add a rotation keyframe here. At the end, in the keyframe 100, we're going to rotate it a little bit more, so it will start pushing this geometry out a little bit more. So the effect we want to achieve here is that this piece is going to affect the road in order that it will be stronger at the end. Okay, let's suppose that I want the disk to start lower, so the fracture effect at the beginning is smaller. I will have to change the keyframes to do that. So instead of that, we can use a trick here. I'm going to set the cursor at the disk. Now we can create an empty object at this point. And now we can select the disk and parent it to the empty. This way we can use the empty to drag the height along the disk animation. So I will put the empty lower and the geometry will follow its initial animation. Now here we can see that we're getting a software deformation. And now at this point the disk will start rotating, so the rod is getting pushed. The thing that I see here is that the constraints are too strong possibly. So I'm going to decrease the value to 25, and also I'm going to raise the disk a little bit. And even though in the frame 100 I'm going to accentuate the rotation of the disks, so the effect will be stronger. Once we have made those changes, we can hit play and see how it's looking. We're starting to see some pieces to tear apart, just like we wanted, because we already have made that change in the constraint strength. Here maybe a little bit too much, but it's fine. Okay, I think in frame 165 it will end. In this current frame we can bake it. So we bake current cache to bake, and every frame we already have will be baked. Now let's limit the timeline to our baked results, and we can now preview it in real time.